Well, hello everyone. Good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you are now. And I'm Yelena, EastCalling with you, and here is my colleague Ryan Milton and our favorite guest Larry Johnson. And yeah, our let us begin our stream for today. Many things have happened during the week, and I have listened to Larry, to your podcast, and to many others. And everyone has, I think, the same question right now: What is going on? What is going on with Trump in particular, and what is going on with Hexet? Because what I have read on your channel and on your Substack, Hexet was trying to acquire some equities of military-industrial complex companies, and this makes situations even more interesting than before, I guess.
Well, his stockbroker, so he had to divest himself. He's not making the investment decisions himself, supposedly, but clearly the guy holding his portfolio tried to invest in the military industrial complex, particularly with Lockheed Martin. And the piece I put up exposed that Lockheed Martin's going to be getting a lot of government contracts or more money out of the government because it's the one that builds the PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot system, and it builds the THAAD missiles for the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense system. And those two systems basically they're depleted. The U.S. is out. So they got to build more and build more fast. And so there's going to be a big infusion of cash. So it looked like if Hegseth or if his broker had been able to invest in this one particular fund that is supposed to be coming out, a money market fund that is specifically tailored for the whole defense industry, then Hegseth would have cashed in. And I mean, really, the corruption right now in the Trump administration is just off the charts. Trump is manipulating the stock market every week. And God, people keep going along with it. Like Monday morning yesterday, and it's always about 7:30 in the morning. So an hour and a half, 2 hours before the stock market opens. Trump, we're really close to an agreement with Iran, man. We're having great discussions. They're not talking to anybody. It's just a complete lie. It's a fabrication.
But just on those numbers, I was just reading, apparently in the last 31 days, the United States has fired 2,400 Patriot interceptors. You've discussed in the past, it takes the manufacture rate is about 650 per year. So the replenishment is roughly 3.5 years. We've also consumed 40% of our global THAAD inventory, and those, I think the production rate is like 100 a year. So, and then of course, our so-called rare earth stockpile has approximately 2 months remaining. So what I was going to ask you is, at what point is this rate of decline of our arms impinge upon what we think we're going to be doing in the Middle East?
Well, again, these the numbers don't add up in terms of what they say. Let's go back and look at Ukraine's claims that they're shooting down 90%. Israel said, we're shooting down 90%. In the Gulf Arab, the United Arab Emirates, they're shooting down 90%. Everyone loves this 90% figure. So the reality is total Patriot missiles produced from January of 2015 through December of 2025, grand total of 4,620. I've researched that. That's the general agreement that's the maximum number. Well, they've deployed Patriots to Ukraine. Now, I saw numbers saying it was like 900. but others are saying 600. So you go with 600. And remember, Ukraine is always claiming that it's shooting down 90% of Russian missiles and drones. So that 600 is capable of shooting down 300 Russian missiles. The Russians fire that many. They fire twice that many in one day. So, it's just ridiculous. Russia's fired over 12,000 missiles. So you got to ask, what the hell, if Ukraine's shooting it down, what are they shooting it down with? Certainly not a Patriot missile system. Of that original 4,620, at least 2,000 of those were sold to foreign governments. Okay? So that takes you down to 2,620. Then about 1,600 of those missiles, those PAC-3 missiles, are sitting in Indo-PACOM in Hawaii or wherever, they're under the U.S. military command that's responsible for dealing with China. So, I'm not great at math, but, that means you got about 1,000 left. And how many missiles has Iran fired in the last, now we're on the 5th week? About 3,000. So that means you need about 6,000 Patriots or THAADs. They are deliberately lying and covering up what the exact nature of it is. Because I've seen videos showing at times 4 to 6 Patriots being launched at one incoming Iranian missile, and they failed to intercept. So this is the U.S. from its ability to produce weapons is in a desperate situation. Now, the point you made about the rare earth minerals is another that Lockheed may get the money to build these things, but if they don't have the rare earth minerals, they won't be able to build them. So, yeah, this is the U.S. defense industry. I don't want to say it's a joke, but it's completely dysfunctional. I guess
maybe it's a scam.
Yeah,
actually. Now, I wanted to, because I think this also touches on your area of expertise. I was reading and continues what we're talking about here. I was reading an article in vtforeignpolicy.org that you also have the Ukrainian military systematically diverting weapons that they got from us and from the Europeans into Latin American drug cartels. Can you address that too?
Yeah, we've heard that. The drug cartels certainly would have the financial resources to purchase such weapons. Okay, and it would not shock or surprise me, but I think it's going to be a fairly narrow. They might go for some javelins, anti-tank missiles. You can an individual can fire that. I'm not sure they've been producing, sending a lot of rifles, so the cartels would want rifles, ammunition, but I'm sure some have been diverted. I'm just not sure what quantity.
Well, what I actually know about Ukraine selling and transferring weapons to other countries is that new Syrian regime, President Ashara, he came to power with the help of Ukrainian drones as well. And here is also news, I think, from the day before yesterday, when Iran destroyed deployment points of Ukrainian specialists, killing, I think, 21 Ukrainian forces who were present in the facility that was sent to the region to counter Iranian missiles attack. So Ukraine considers themselves experts in anti-missile and anti-drone warfare. So they deployed people there, and these people got killed, actually. And this was confirmed by one of the Russian, let's say it, open source channels.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't quite understand how Ukrainian drone experts factor into defeating a missile attack by Iran.
Well, that's maybe it's a PR move. Most likely, it's a PR
Yeah,
move by Zelensky. And actually, the numbers that they are claiming that they are hitting down 90% of air, incoming missiles and drones from Russian side. It's I don't know. It's very strange because we know that Russian air defense is the best in the world. This is not what I was speaking. This is what experts are saying,
yeah.
and it has efficiency of 95 to 97%. And Ukraine having 90% of air defense efficiency, it's strange. So, and what I have heard from people who are close to Russian defense complex, they said that Iron Dome, or as they call it, Iron Calendar, it has
Yeah.
40% efficiency compared to others. So 90% of Ukrainian air defense, it doesn't seem real to me. So
Well,
what Ukrainian
but again, how does a drone intercept a missile? I don't understand that. That makes no sense.
Impossible, I would think.
Yeah,
impossible, of course.
yeah. So that's why they said that they were going there to help. Uh, now, if they're trying to use Ukrainian drones to intercept Iranian drones, okay, that there may be they may have some expertise in that regard. But yeah, I did see, and I think it was an accurate report that I've seen that at least one confirmed death of a Ukrainian drone expert. Um, as far as the other 20, haven't seen any confirmation of that. Maybe true, maybe not. But um, it is. This doesn't mean that Ukraine's winning the war back in its own territory. Uh, and I guess I see it as just another scam, a way to go out and get some money, because their financial resources from other sources from the U.S. and Europe have been drying up.
And they fight information. They fight information warfare too. So nobody's paying attention to Ukraine anymore.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and Zelensky went on begging tour to Gulf states again, and was asked. Actually, I don't quite understand the stance of Persian Gulf monarchies. Why I think that they had enough time to realize that US cannot provide them the security that they need, and instead of providing security, it provides more trouble for them.
Yeah,
And I think today or yesterday, I think Caroline Levitt even said that Trump actually, she said, I don't want to run ahead of Trump, but in general, he would announce that monarchies are supposed to finance the war against Iran. So practically, they're supposed to finance American war, which targets them from their own funds. It's somehow
yeah.
so
How
strange.
and where are they going to get those funds from right now? Because they've got no income. They're like the guy that's bought a house, but he lost his job. So he's supposed to make the house payment, but he doesn't have any income. No more paychecks. You look at United Arab Emirates is the best example, or typifies the region. 25%. It is maybe not as dependent as some of the other countries on oil export. 25% of its annual income was from oil, but they also depended upon international trade in terms of they've got this large free trade port called Jebel Ali. Well, there are no ships coming in or leaving. I mean, the strait is shut down. So that's done. Construction's done. The financial services industry, they had these people working in these office buildings, moving large amounts of money. They're not working. Tourism, it's down. So there's no cash flow. 80, at least 83 to 87% of their income is frozen. So how are you going to go paying? If the only way they can maybe raise cash now is that if they hold U.S. Treasuries, start selling those. But otherwise, the cash flow is dried up, and as long as the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, there's no money really going in and out for Saudis, Bahrainis, Kuwaitis, Qataris, and Emiratis. They're hurting.
Would you say so? Let me preface this by saying I've been reading prominent Chinese scholar Einar Tangen. I think that's how you say it. He was describing how the colonial policies from the past did not disappear, but adapted into from direct territorial control to economic systems that used debt, the commodity pricing mechanisms, financial institutions, and then what we see with the sanction regime, that this has become basically the model of colonialism. But what you're now describing with what Yelena brought up, take the military-industrial complex, 80% of what Saudi Arabia funded or purchased was from the United States in terms of their weapons. They were represented the fifth largest militarized budget in the world. So my question to you is, at what point does this become a systemic breakdown of the so-called Western financial system? Are we there yet?
Oh yeah, we're in the midst of it. It's just people, we're like the chicken with its head cut off. We're still moving around. We don't realize we've lost our head. This is the system. The system is dying in front of our eyes, because it's not just the oil, it's the liquid natural gas, it's the fertilizer, it's sulfuric acid, it's helium. All of these are critical components in a global supply chain for producing a wide variety of items, and particularly with respect to computer chips. There are inventories that are built up, and people are drawing down on those inventories. It's Ryan, like the point you made earlier about the rare earths. When those are gone, they're gone, and it's not like you just like you order a pizza, call the number and say, I'd like a pepperoni mushroom and have it here in 30 minutes. It doesn't quite work that way. So what we've seen already with Iran is previously it was tied into making payments through the United Arab Emirates, through the financial system, the Western, if you call it the outpost of Western finance. Well, now they're not doing that. It's all going through China, and they've boosted the Chinese particularly by saying, hey, if you want to get your cargo out of the Persian Gulf, great, you're going to pay a fine, and it's got to be paid in yuan. So the Chinese renminbi is it's doing quite well. So this is what we're witnessing. This is will be seen later, I think, is one of those watershed moments where the West lost control of the financial system, and an alternative emerged and began prospering.
Yeah, but at the same backdrop, Europe still tries to impose new sanctions against Russia, and they're continuing anti-Russian rhetorics.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm literally thinking that I should have become psychiatrist. Maybe then I would be able to explain what's going on, because now I really, from ordinary human logic, I really struggle to explain all that.
These market systems they're not even acting with logic or rationality. I was just checking to see what the Dow Jones was doing, and it's now up 5, almost 600 points in one day, because they think the war is almost over. The war is coming to an end. No, it's not. I mean, these people are friggin' delusional. They have, I have never ceased to be astonished at people buying into Donald Trump's bullshit and really just across the board believing, oh yeah, he's talking to the Iranians and they're hurting so bad they can't wait to stop. No.
Well, this article, let me ask you about this. What your immediate reaction? This came out last night in the Wall Street Journal, where supposedly Trump is telling his aides he's now willing to end the war without reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and specifically said that they'll just shift this thing because they don't want to drag beyond their 4 to 6 week timeline. So they'll ship to, hey, we crippled Iran's navy, we crippled their missile stockpiles, and now we're going to wind the fighting down. I mean, what you're saying, and then this article, I mean, my question is he just going to flip back to, okay, now we're going to go for an amphibious assault, or what?
Well, all I know is that military personnel and military equipment, particularly equipment for doing an amphibious assault, continue to flow into the Middle East. They're not stopping. It's, in fact, the pace of those deliveries is increasing, not diminishing. Right? So if Trump's made such a decision, it certainly hasn't been communicated to the folks handling military logistics, because they're moving everything forward, because there is going to be U.S. forces introduced on the ground somewhere, somehow, whether it's Karg Island, Kemish Island, Bandar Abbas, some assault on Chabahar, it could be any number of things. But Trump's not backing off despite those reports.
And now these troops are actually capable of acting within this particular area. I'm not questioning their, capabilities in general, but their capability in acting in this particular place in that particular time, because Iran has very sophisticated terrain from a military point of view. It's mountainous area actually, and I don't know. I remember D-Day immediately when people were literally storming the shore of France, and they were like approximate lifetime of person on the front line was less than 2 minutes. Is Trump willing to do something like that in Strait of Hormuz in seizing the island? So he will just get the coffins back.
Well, any attack on Iran, there's no clear. The problem is, what is the military objective? Because I draw a parallel with, say, World War II. When the United States launched in 1942 the attack, they invaded Guadalcanal, an island in the South Pacific near Australia and near Guinea. And the purpose of invading that island was to get control of an airfield and to prevent Japan from having control of that airfield, because that airfield was going to be important in helping to prevent the navies, either the U.S. Navy or the Japanese Navy, from being able to control the waterways. So you had a that was a pretty well-defined mission. What's the mission here? Karg Island is, to shut off Iran's or take control of Iran's oil. My understanding is Iran basically can turn off the flow from the mainland so that it doesn't ship out of Karg, and it has at least 4 other terminals that can be used for exporting oil. And but let's just assume that it is the goal to seize the oil. Then to get raises the question, well, how the hell do you get the oil out of the Persian Gulf? Or Trump threatened, no, we're going to blow up the oil wells. And then you go, well, wait a second. 3 weeks ago, you lifted all sanctions on Iran because you wanted as much oil out in the market as possible. Now you're saying you want to blow up the wells and basically reduce the supply of oil. Which is it? You wanting to increase supplies or diminish supplies? Because if you diminish supplies, the price is going to go up. And I was just seeing the ticker tape run. I guess Brent is up now to $118, $119. Okay, so it's approaching that $120 mark. That means West Texas Intermediate crude, that's up over $100. So the oil price shock is going to work its way through the system. So okay, or they're going to let land Marines at Kemish Island, which is right there at the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. What opens the Strait of Hormuz is that you have eliminated the military ability of Iran to threaten ships. And right now, Iran has submarines that can fire, many submarines that can fire torpedoes. They have mines. They have fast boats that can plant those mines. They have underwater maritime drones. They have above water drones. They have missiles and rockets and a variety of systems that can shoot at ships from shore. So landing on Kemish Island doesn't eliminate any of that. So, and to go out and take away, reduce that capability by Iran is, I would argue, it's an impossible mission. Impossible from the standpoint that the U.S. does not have enough troops, and the United States is not willing to incur the kinds of losses that would accompany any kind of mission to destroy all those capabilities. So, it's like, what the hell are you putting ground forces on? Just, to show off? Or you think that's going to intimidate Iran? It's not. So
Scott Ritter had talked about the troop landings in World War II. So maybe you can say more about what you're talking about on these different islands and so forth. He said that in many of the cases, there were divisions that were required to take these little postage stamp islands in the Pacific. I mean, I don't know that we have divisions going to this area now, do we?
Oh, no. I mean, if you're talking division, you're talking well over 10,000, 15,000 men in just one unit. Recognize that battalion level, you're talking about 800 guys. The Marines with their with the MUSE, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, they've got between 2,200, 2,500 Marines in that. So, that works out to about the equivalent of 3 battalions. And go back and look at, like, they've used, who was it? Lindsey Graham talking about Iwo Jima. The United States spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks just bombing the hell out of Iwo Jima. I mean, it was just saturated with barrages from the battleships and from airstrikes. And even after 3 weeks, when the Marines landed, they ran into intense fire, and they suffered. There was always seen as one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. Now, compared to what the Soviets experienced during World War II, this was like a minor skirmish. But for the United States, it became part of our culture and lore. This the support. Think of all those ships that were offshore of Iwo Jima. We can't put our ships into the Strait of Hormuz. It's not like you've got these massive channels that you could pile ships in there, and plus they're going to be vulnerable to attack by the very same weapon systems that Iran's employing against commercial traffic. So it's a whole question of how, if you're going to land the Marines, you're going to put at risk a lot of bigger ships that could be sunk. No, this is, the United States has got itself in a real pickle here.
So how do we do it? I still don't get how we get in there. Then it's still not clear to me. It's not just it can't just be projection of power. That was the whole idea, I believe, with the carrier battle groups. And this kind of goes into the so-called madman theory, where Trump makes outlandish statements, then he escalates.
Right.
And supposedly this is a make a deal strategy. But it seems like it's now becoming so repetitive that Iran, they don't have to do all this to respond. They just simply have to not open the Persian Gulf.
Right. The taco, Trump always chickens out. What we're witnessing is the end of a 20th century military technology. Aircraft carriers are really no longer relevant. They've been made irrelevant because ineffective because of the advent of hypersonic missiles. When the aircraft carrier first showed up in like 1930, it was in the 1930s they started. I think that was the first ones deployed. It was seen as a way that a portable airfield. You could take airplanes to a particular location that they might not otherwise be able to reach, and you could launch them from that position, and they could fly out, conduct a mission, and come back. So it was a way to actually project your military force. We saw towards the end of World War II, one of the limits of that are beginning to expose the vulnerability of the carrier because of what happened off of Okinawa with the Japanese kamikaze attacks. So those were, let's call those an early form of a cruise missile, except it's got a human being guiding it. It's not being guided through electronics. And they lost at least one carrier. I think it was Yorktown. So now jump ahead. Here we are in the 21st. We're 25 years into the 21st century. I can't believe that. Good Lord. Now these ships have to stay far offshore, because if they get close, as happened with the Abraham Lincoln, it gets attacked with a drone swarm and with some missiles. And apparently it did suffer damage to its flight deck, and it had to bail out. So let's say the carrier can get within 1,000 miles of the coast of Iran. Great. The problem is the aircraft that are on that aircraft carrier have a range of 500 miles. So what's the point? They can't reach shore without getting refueled. And if you're going to refuel them with the KC-135, that's a relatively slow flying aircraft that can actually be shot down pretty easily. So right now what we're seeing is this very, very expensive weapon system that we've developed to project force. It's no longer relevant. Not at all. So we've got that problem. And your method for delivering troops. It's basically you drop them in by parachute, you fly them in and land, or you launch them from an amphibious platform. And again, the advent of rockets and drones and missiles have completely changed the calculus on that. It's no longer as doable as it was say 25 years ago. 25 years ago, or less than 23, going in on the eve of the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the United States had the luxury of, we had 11 months It started in February of 2002. We had 11 months to build up our forces, and those forces were assembled in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. They didn't, there were fears. I think there was a Scud launched that did kill a few, but the ballistic missile threat or the threat of cruise missiles wasn't significant back then. Today, I mean, with particularly with drone technology, you can't assemble soldiers in a position that close to your objective without them being, wiped out potentially. And that's what we've seen in Ukraine. That's one of the lessons of these last, almost 4 years of this war, that you don't get a large concentration of soldiers in one place. They get wiped out. So you got to work in very small dispersed units. So it completely changes the calculus. Sorry to go into such detail, but it's, I think it's important that people understand this is, if you've watched Saving Private Ryan or any of this, the World War II movies, this ain't that anymore. It's a completely different ball game.
Yeah, these are very important things because some people actually think, the more the better, but they forget that there is, I don't know, in English I will try to translate. In Russian it's оперативная ёмкость территории, operational volume of the territory. This is what you were explaining, how much people can be allocated in one particular area, so they're dispersed in a more or less safe amount. So if damage is carried on, then it's not that critical.
Correct.
And there were several questions from our subscribers, and let's start with the first one, which came online. Is it true that several F-35 were delivered without radar on the nose, but instead with weights for the time being?
Yes. Now those aren't forward. They're not in the theater there in Israel and Saudi Arabia. But yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to some of the rare earth minerals that are essential for producing the radar. They're not available. Oh my God! That's $100 million airplane, by the way. It's just what has happened is we are so much of the U.S. weaponry is extremely expensive. And it's extremely expensive because they've gone for, we're going to get all this super duper technology built in. And yet it can be taken out with, a $5,000, $10,000 drone. So, you got a $100 million airplane that can be, taken out with a $50,000 drone. It's the economics on it no longer make any kind of sense.
Actually, this is what Russian commenters were talking about, because Russian defense sector, this industry, it operates with close to zero profit margin. So they keep it profit very, very low. So it is sufficient to cover some natural
things
that they need. Yeah.
It's not privatized.
Yes, it's state-owned.
Yeah, the state. This is one where it makes sense. With the state's not keen on saying, okay, we got to keep our shareholders happy, and we got to build in this kind of margin, and it's actually more efficient.
Yeah, but is it possible that US switches to the same system? Because as far as I understand,
no.
Well, it would have made sense, because now I think now they must have driven some kind of conclusions that actually it is not about this expensive and nice shiny toys, but it is about mass production and effectiveness.
Yeah, you gotta. They're not going to walk away from a system that produces so much money for the shareholders. I mean, that's it's all about the money. It's too profitable to move to a system where there's no longer the profit to be made from all these weapons of war. Oh my goodness! That would mean there's no No financial incentive to go to war anymore. Heavens, can't have that.
What I always have the next question, and what money is actually worth right now? Because I don't understand value of money anymore.
Yeah, well, it's called inflation.
Yes, and I think it is at a at a such rate that we don't even realize that.
Mhm.
This is the problem. Because for now, as I see it, we have agreed on some kind of rules which everyone sticks to. But as soon as we step out of the existing system, what is major profit would actually be what like this carriage that turns into pumpkin suddenly. So all these profits will also turn into shards, and that's it.
Yeah, well, the significant portion of the U.S. economy, and I would argue that over the last 40 years in particular, um, that's why there's been such an emphasis upon having a good external threat. We got to fight. First, it was the Soviets, and then it was terrorism, and now it's the Chinese and terrorists and Iran. So as long as you've got this external threat, you can continue to justify boosting the defense budget. The U.S. defense budget is supposed to be up like to $1.5 trillion by next year. Um, when you realize that the combined defense budgets of China and Russia are, 1/3 of that. I mean, they don't even with that, and look at what they're able to build with that amount of money. The United States can't even compete on that front.
And the irony of it is that Marco Rubio just came out and made a statement about this question of spending on military, and he was wagging his finger at the Iranians. I don't know if you saw this, Yelena, the video of
At the
Rubio.
end of the day, I think that if there are people in Iran who now, given everything that's happened, are willing to move in a different direction for their country, that would be great. Imagine in Iran that instead of spending their wealth, billions of dollars supporting terrorists or weapons, had spent that money helping the people of Iran, you'd have a much different country. So we are always hopeful that that would exist over there.
Good. Jesus, that pisses me off. I mean, just it infuriates me. Number one, Iran hasn't been spending billions of dollars, particularly supporting terrorism. No, Marco, look in the mirror, dude. It's you. It's the United States that does that. Number one, it is the United States that's spending more than $1 trillion on these kinds of needless wars. And the sanctions, you're pretending that Iran didn't have sanctions on it, which is why the country's impoverished. That's why, because the United States has used economic terrorism against the people of Iran. So these guys, they create these fairy tales, these fantasies, and then what's so disgusting about it is they actually believe it. And in the course of that, I've seen, I've made a point that Dave Smith, a comedian, has made. But unlike Dave, I actually back it up with the real numbers. Dave pointed out that the United States is probably the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world compared to anybody. And you start totaling it up and say, okay, well, wait a second. So let's define it. Simple definition of terrorism. Bibi Netanyahu's definition, I might add. He presented this to William F. Buckley on a television show that was on public television back in the 1980s. Terrorism is the use of violence against civilians for political purposes. Period. Simple. The key is violence against civilians. If it's as the U.S. alleges that, Iran was helping Iraqi insurgents build bombs that were used to blow up U.S. troops. Well, that's not terrorism, folks. That's called war. And the United States illegally invaded Iraq. So when it's getting its ass kicked for invading another country, sorry, I don't want to hear any goddamn crocodile tears coming out of your eyes. All right? You walked into it, you picked a fight, and then when they fight back, you want to cry about it? Shut up. No, but when the United States helped fund, provided chemical precursors to Iraq that were used to attack Iranian soldiers and Iranian civilians with chemical weapons, and when the United States was providing intelligence to Iraq that was used to attack Iranian soldiers and Iranian civilians. So there's both military and then the terrorism aspect. That's a state sponsor of terrorism right there. And what we did to the civilians in Iraq, what we did to the civilians in Afghanistan, to the civilians in Libya, to the civilians in Somalia, to the civilians in Serbia, to civilians in Panama. I mean, we just go down the list. It's unfortunately, and Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. I mean, it infuriates me that the Americans are so caught up with this projection onto others of the very thing that we are doing, and we don't acknowledge it or accept the fact that we have been involved with the biggest human rights violations in the 20th and 21st century.
I also want to ask some questions from the audience. Another questions: how are the KIAs really counted? Are, for instance, the death of service members in the hotels while the leave continued in the statistics as a KIA?
Yeah, they've been keeping that under wraps. I don't know how that's possible, because you would think that the families of those who have been killed would be speaking out, but so far they've been able to keep it under wraps. So we don't. Right now, they're still running with this official death toll of 13, which I think is ludicrous. I don't buy it. I know that the other day when there was the attack on the Prince Saud Air Base in Saudi Arabia, that the Pentagon came out and initially said there were only just 12 casualties, 12 wounded, and I was told by someone who knows that no, that number was about triple that at least, and didn't have a breakout of killed or wounded. So, yeah, they're lying, and they've got to lie, because if they tell the truth about it, the public opinion, which is already strongly against this war, is going to turn even stronger.
But even though, like you say, and I think there is lying going on too, there's a Netflix series right now called Turning Point, The Vietnam War, which leaves a lot of things out, like the fact that Uncle Ho was fighting French imperialism before we even got in there. But throughout that war, the U.S. maintained overwhelming tactical superiority. We won almost every single battle. They were basically declaring victory just before the Tet Offensive. Yet, we, though we inflicted these higher casualties, we did not win. It was a disaster that to this day, Americans still don't quite understand. So I think that whatever it is going to be, that Iran is reshaping the whole world situation, and Russia, China. Looking at the oil shocks we see in Australia, 500 petrol stations don't have it. They don't have the petrol, but in China, they've braced themselves over years. They are not as dependent as we in the West are on petroleum. So I guess my question to you is, at what point does the American population wake up and actually shift the policy, not the party, but the policy?
Yeah, well, it's going to take about, I think, having 2,000 or 3,000 dead Americans come back. Because right now, if they're just saying, oh, okay, 13 dead, so what? Yeah, that's not a lot. It's when or that and or when the economic price of this war starts really hitting home. I mean, it's hitting now, but it is not at a level that has caused the kind of excruciating pain with people being laid off, factories shutting down, supply chain shortages, dramatic increases in the price of food. We're seeing right now with the price of air. If you're going to go, you need to fly somewhere. Man, the price is tripled because the airlines now have triple fuel costs from what they were 3 weeks ago, and so they're cutting back on flights. And so the ripple effect, where the American people finally start feeling the pain, that's when they'll finally wake up. I mean, the war is not popular. You already had a majority of Americans say, no, this is a bad idea. We don't want to do that. But, they haven't transitioned to the point of vigorous protest against it, saying, no, we want out completely. Stop this. Trump's caught. He doesn't, his personality is such, he can't admit that he's a loser, but he's going to be compelled to admit that he lost. And at that point, the hunt for scapegoats will go on. That'll be there'll be some good karma in that for Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, I was just going to say Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. But also, you watch, I anticipate one of the people that will be blamed as well will be Tulsi Gabbard. You didn't tell us, and she probably did not produce the kinds of warning documents against this that she should have, and then they'll use that against her, and frankly, I won't have an ounce of sympathy for her at all. She will deserve it because she should have spoken up. She should have, if nothing else, resigned. This is wrong. This is a lie. This is not true. But instead, she went along, oh, it's the president to decide what is an imminent threat. Oh, for God's sake. Do your damn job, woman.
Well, I think the last year she spoke out against invasion of Iran, and she mentioned that Iran is not a threat, and she was told to shut up, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
But this time she just kept silent and like, okay, do guys what you want. I'm not telling anything.
She went along with it. So as long as you're going along with it, okay, take responsibility.
Yeah, she will just go down with everyone else. But do you see, or maybe there are signs that some, nervousness appears in the Senate, in the ruling class, because they must understand, at least some of them, that economic catastrophe is about to come?
It's starting. You're starting to see at least some on the Democrat side are speaking out. Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut, he's been pretty forceful. So it's starting, but we're not there yet. Again, it's going to take. It'll take Trump trying to put ground forces into Karg Island or into Chemish, and then they get chewed up, and then on top of getting a lot of dead, wounded Americans, they're not going to be able to get them withdrawn. It'd be really bad if they get caught and captured by Iranians and are then paraded as POWs. Then the proverbial shit will hit the fan here in the United States. That's for sure.
And
but the rest of the world feels it. Yeah, there you go.
Here is the gas price. It's compared to March 23, so the prices will go even higher. Well, you see, Europe is well, it's not only Europe, actually, Africa as well. Also, some states have very expensive fuel, but we are very, very dependent on fuel.
Yeah, I don't understand Nigeria. I mean, Nigeria produces, it should have a problem, but there it is.
Well, it also depends if you have oil refining on your territory or not, because like
Yeah,
Norway produces oil, but it doesn't refine. Oil has only one small refinery, which makes no sense for me. So actually, fuel prices in Sweden are lower than ones in Norway. And Norway mines oil, and Sweden does not.
hmm
And here is one more very interesting image that I wanted to show. This oil flows from Persian Gulf and and southern Eastern Asia. So this major price blow is not there yet, because there are still some tankers that are still going,
right.
and there is some at the sea. But what is going to happen when we run out of that oil? This is the big question.
Yeah, that's where the full the economic impact, the damage, that's going to really start hitting starting this week, into this week, and it will accelerate next week and accelerate the week after that. So April is going to be a tough month.
And what I also wanted to mention here is we still don't know what is the real impact on the oil industry in the Gulf countries and in the Iran as well. So even if Trump succeeded in unblocking Strait of Hormuz, it will not automatically restore the oil industry, because we still
Yeah.
need to assess what was damaged, how major the damage was, and in order to deploy the people who will repair all that, we will need to produce a lot of equipment, and
hmm
secondly, people will have to work in place. But what company will send its employees in the conflict zone? This is
Well,
the second question.
yeah, well, it's, Stanislav Kripivnik. Stas used to work in that as the supply chain with Halliburton, and he did a real good analysis the other day with the boys from the Duran, uh, pointing out that it's just not a matter of flipping a switch or turning on a pump. The repair of some of this infrastructure that is involved with pumping the oil, as an example, or the liquid natural gas, uh, you could be looking at months, if not years, of time to get it repaired or to get the equipment in place. It may actually have to be produced. Um, so yeah, this is we're looking at damage that's long term, and we just haven't experienced the full effect of it right now. It's like the fact that 35% of this fertilizer is no longer available. Well, that means crops that were going to be planted now won't have the fertilizer, and those crops won't grow, or when the harvest comes in 6 months, 8 months, then we'll find out we got a shortage of food. The shortage doesn't appear right now, but a lot of these are delayed effects.
Yeah.
Mm. Fantastic. All right.
All right,
Well,
guys. Hey, that was a fast hour.
It
Oh, yeah.
was, Larry. Thank you very much. I
As usual.
appreciate the extended military historical background, because it does cause you to have to rethink everything. At least a normal person rethinks.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah. If people will just think it through, they'll realize, man, we got some real problems here.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right,
Thank you
guys.
very much, Larry.
Yeah.
See you next
Yeah.
week.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
See you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So
Woo.
yes, it was a very quick hour indeed, but all the analytical people now are busy, and because everyone is talking about one topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that we are only about to understand what is going to hit us. This is the problem.
Absolutely. All right.
Because
Yeah, you were talking about some of the higher costs of things, and I was just reading right before we finished there, that according to the UN Assistant Secretary General Abdallah al-Dardari, Arab countries have now, the cost to them economically has been $186 billion and 3.7 million jobs. So this is going to basically crush all of those GCC monarchies. They're monarchies. They're not democracies.
Yes. So we'll see if Saudi Arabia will still be Saudi Arabia, because Saudi is one of the clans that governs the
Mm.
Arabia. So maybe we will have some other kind of Arabia. I don't know who will be willing to take the state over in such a state. And actually, the problem is that these countries, they were like nomadic countries, and people who originally lived there, they got used to deal with not very much water actually. But with
Well,
the
maybe it'll
amount
be
of
Yemen.
well, with the amount of population that is there right now, I don't know how they are going to survive. This will be so. Actually, what I am also expecting is a major refugee crisis, and in which direction will these people go? This is the question. So,
Mhm.
you know about Bronze Age catastrophe? Maybe you have read something about that. It's
Not specifically. I think of Dark Ages, but maybe that's what you're kind of alluding to.
Well, actually, Bronze Age catastrophe was the first known, so to say, major crisis that hit existing supply routes, actually, and it was because the climate changed, and the areas which were inhabited before, people simply couldn't live there anymore, and they had to move. So all the commerce, all the trade routes were destroyed, and this is what led to you can actually I really suggest to find the material and read it, because it's very interesting, because the globalization that we are living in now is it's not the first one, actually it's the
Mhm.
third known to us. So what happened in that time, I hope we are not at a similar stage, at least. But too many parallels, unfortunately, with the ancient Rome. You see, I have narrow book here. So
Well, that's the whole thing. That's why I brought up, parties can change. I think the Congress, the House, maybe even the Senate in the United States will change in the midterm elections, which means impeachment, threats against Donald Trump. But unless the fundamental way that people think, how they make their economic decisions, their relations between countries, if that doesn't change, it doesn't matter what parties change. I know there was a prominent UN official who just resigned. Again, these institutions, I certainly complain about the UN all the time. Very ineffective, useless institutions. So, but just going and getting another institution is not going to change it if the fundamental thinking doesn't change.
there was a very rude joke. I will not joke it now about changing the placement of furniture.
Oh,
But
yeah,
yeah, in this case, placement replacing the furniture, changing places of the furniture will not help. We need to change people, and we need to change thinking as well. This is the thing. But
exactly.
unfortunately, the people who are in charge now, I think they hardly understand what is going on,
Exactly.
because they've been trained and raised within the system. This is the problem, and
They believe their own brainwashing. So,
yeah.
all right.
Yes. And on this optimistic note,
Well, the good news is that change is a universal principle. Nothing stays the same. So we have the power of creative reason. We can choose to change.
yes. You are a bike rider, I'm a runner, so we will manage it somehow. People get used to good working out. It will definitely help you amid fuel crisis.
Yep. Exactly. All right, Elena. Well,
Yeah,
you
okay.
take care.
Yeah, you also. See you
Bye.
next week,
Okay.
hopefully.
See you.
Bye bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye.